Hi, today we are going to learn about rise of nationalism in Europe part 2. In this chapter of part 2, we have three subtopics. They are the making of Germany and Italy, visualizing the nation, nationalism and imperialism. The making of Germany and Italy. Germany. Can the army be the architect of a nation? We have already seen in previous chapter about the revolution of liberals. In 1848, nationalism in Europe has changed from its democratic principles to conservatism. Nationalist sentiments were often mobilized by these conservatives for promoting state power and achieving political domination over Europe. This is clearly seen in the process by which Germany and Italy came to be unified as nation states. Nationalist feelings were widespread among German middle class. They tried to unite the different regions of German Confederation into a nation state governed by an elected parliament. This liberal initiative of nation building was, however, repressed by the combined forces of monarchy and the military, who were supported by large landowners called Junkers of Prussia. Thereupon, Prussia took the leadership of the movement for national unification. Its chief minister, Otto von Bismarck, was the architect of this process, who carried out with the help of Prussian army and bureaucracy 3 wars over 7 years with Austria, Denmark, and France ended in Prussian victory and completed the process of unification. Prussian King Kaiser William I was proclaimed German Emperor in a ceremony which was held at Versailles on January 18, 1871. The assembly comprised of princes of German states, representatives of the army, important Prussian ministers, including the chief minister Otto von Bismarck. They all gathered in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles. Nation-building process in Germany had demonstrated the dominance of Prussian state power. The new state placed a strong emphasis on modernizing the currency, banking, legal and judicial systems in Germany. Prussian measures and practices often became a model for rest of the Germany. Italy unified. So what are the constraints for unification of Italy as a nation? Just like Germany, Italy too had a long history of political fragmentation. Prior to 1848, Italy did not exist as a nation. So Italians were scattered over several dynastic states as well as the multinational Habsburg Empire. During the middle of 19th century, Italy was divided into 7 states ruled by different empires, of which Sardinia Piedmont was ruled by Italian princely house. The north was under Austrian Habsburg. The center was ruled by the Pope, and the southern regions were under the domination of the Bourbon kings of Spain. Even the Italian language did not have one common form. There were many regional and local variations. So, what are the reasons for unification of Italy? The first one being Giuseppe Mazzini. During the 1830s, Giuseppe Mazzini had sought to put together a coherent program for a unitary Italian republic. He had also formed a secret society called Young Italy for the dissemination of his goals. The second one is failure of revolutionary uprisings. So in the years 1831 and 1848, there were failures of these revolutions. So now the mantle fell on Sardinia Piedmont under its ruler, King Victor Emmanuel II. He had to unify the Italian states through war. The ruling elites of this region thought that unified Italy offered them the possibility of economic development and political dominance. So, who are the other important people in unifying Italy? Count Camillo di Cavour, or the chief minister Cavour, led the movement to unify the regions of Italy. He was neither a revolutionary nor a democrat. Like many other wealthy and educated members of the Italian elite, he spoke French much better than he did Italian. He engineered a tactful diplomatic alliance with France, in which Sardinia Piedmont succeeded in defeating the Austrian forces in 1859. Giuseppe Garibaldi. Apart from regular troops, a large number of armed volunteers under the leadership of Giuseppe Garibaldi joined the process of unifying Italy. In 1860, they marched into South Italy and Kingdom of Two Sicilies and succeeded in winning the support of the local peasants in order to drive out the Spanish rulers. In 1861, Victor Emmanuel II was proclaimed King of United Italy. However, much of the Italian population, very high, remained unaware of liberal nationalist ideology. The peasant masses who had supported Garibaldi in southern Italy had never heard of Italia or the word L'Italia, which was used then by the liberal nationalists, actually meant Italy. The peasants believed L'Italia was Victor Emmanuel's wife. The strange case of Britain. Unlike the case of Germany and Italy, Britain's formation of nation-state was different, as it was not the result of sudden rising or any revolution. Before the 18th century, there was no Britain nation. The people who were living in British Isles belonged to different ethnic groups such as English, Welsh, Scot, or Irish. Each ethnic group had their own cultural and political traditions. The English nation continuously grew in wealth, importance, and power, so it extended its influence over the other nations of the islands. After a long struggle, the English Parliament seized power from the monarchy in 1688. Through the English Parliament, a nation state with England at its center started taking shape. The Bill of Rights passed in 1688 established the rule of law in the country. It provided that suspension of laws, implementation of taxes, and raising of an army could be done only with the consent of the Parliament. Thus, Parliament became supreme. The Act of Union in 1707 was passed by the Parliament of England between England and Scotland. that resulted in the formation of United Kingdom of Great Britain. This act meant that England was able to impose its influence on Scotland. Let's see the differences between England and Scotland. Throughout the 17th century, there was mistrust between England and Scotland. However, in 1707, the Scottish Parliament voted to agree to the union between these two countries. The Scottish Parliament was dissolved and both countries unified to form United Kingdom of Great Britain. The British Parliament was dominated by its English members, and this growth in British identity meant that culture of Scotland and its political institutions were systematically suppressed. England was a Protestant nation, thus the Catholic clans who lived in Scottish Highlands, whenever they tried to gain their independence, was repressed by the England. They were forbidden to speak their Gaelic language or wear their national dress. In large numbers, they were driven out of their homeland forcefully. Now let's learn about Ireland. Ireland suffered a similar fate. It was a country deeply divided between Catholics and Protestants. The English helped the Protestants of Ireland to establish their dominance over largely Catholic country. The revolts of Catholics against the British nation was suppressed. After failed revolt led by Wolfe Tone and his United Irishmen in 1798 against British nation, in 1801, Ireland was incorporated into the United Kingdom. So a new British nation was made which has dominant English culture. The symbols of New Britain, the British flag, Union Jack, the national anthem, God Save Our Noble King, the English language were actively promoted, and the older nations survived only as subordinate partners in its union. Visualizing the nation. It is easy for us to represent a ruler through a portrait or a statue. But how does one visualize a nation? Artists in the 18th and 19th centuries found a way out by personifying a nation. They represented a country as if it were a person. Then nations were portrayed as female figures. The female form that was chosen to personify the nation, who did not stand for any particular woman in real life. It was just an abstract idea of nation to give a concrete form. That is, female figures became an allegory of a nation. So allegory means it can be a story, a play, a picture, or a character, or even an event, symbol which represents something. So during French Revolution, artists used female allegory to portray ideas such as liberty, justice, and republic. These ideals were represented through specific objects or symbols. The attributes of liberty are the red cap or the broken chain, while justice is generally a blindfolded woman carrying a pair of weighing scales. Similar female allegories were invented by artists in the 19th century to represent the nation. In France, Marianne, a popular Christian name, which underlined the idea of people's nation. Her characteristics were drawn from those of liberty and the republic. The red cap, the tricolor, the cockade. Statues of Marian were erected in public squares to remind the public of the national symbol of unity and to persuade them to identify with it. Marian images were marked on coins and stamps. Similarly, Germania became the allegory of the German nation. In visual representations, Germania wears a crown of oak leaves, as German oak stands for heroism. In this slide, we are going to see the meanings of this, some of the symbols which were used in nationalism and unification process. Broken chains, it signified being freed. Breastplate with eagle, its significance was symbol of the German Empire and strength. Crown of oak leaves signified heroism. Sword, it signified readiness to fight. Olive branch around the sword, it signified willingness to make peace. Black, red, and gold tricolor signified the flag of liberal nationalists in 1848, banned by the dukes of German states. Rays of rising sun, it signified the beginning of a new era. Nationalism and imperialism. So we already understand the word nationalism. What is imperialism? It's a political system in which rich and powerful countries control other countries which are not rich or as powerful as them. So by the last quarter of 19th century, nationalism no longer retained its idealistic liberal democratic sentiment which existed in the first half of the century. It became a narrow creed with limited ends. During this period, nationalist groups became increasingly intolerant of each other and were ever ready to go to war. The major European powers in turn manipulated the nationalist aspirations of the subject people in Europe to further their own imperialistic aims. The most serious source of nationalist tension in Europe after 1871 was the area called the Balkans. The Balkans. The most serious source of nationalist tension in Europe after 1871 was the area called the Balkans. The Balkans was a region of geographical and ethnic variation comprising modern-day Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, and Montenegro, whose inhabitants were broadly known as the Slavs. A large part of the Balkans was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. The spread of the ideas of romantic nationalism in the Balkans, together with the disintegration of Ottoman Empire, made this region very explosive. Although the 19th century Ottoman Empire had sought to strengthen itself through modernization and internal reforms, but with very little success. One by one, its European subject nationalities broke away from its control and declared independence. The Balkan people based their claims for independence or political rights on nationality and used history to prove that they had once been independent but had subsequently been subjugated by foreign powers. Hence, the rebellious nationalities in the Balkans thought of their struggles as attempts to win back their long lost independence. As the different Slavic nationalities struggled to define their identity and independence, the Balkan area became an area of intense conflict. The Balkan states were fiercely jealous of each other and each hoped to gain more territory at the expense of the others. Matters were further complicated because the Balkans also became the scene of big power rivalry. During this period, there was intense rivalry among the European powers over trade and colonies as well as naval and military might. These rivalries were very evident in the way the Balkan problem unfolded. Each power, Russia, Germany, England, Austro Hungary, was keen on countering the hold of other powers over the Balkans and extending its own control over the area. This led to a series of wars in the region and finally the First World War. Nationalism, aligned with imperialism, led Europe to disaster in 1914. However, many countries in the world which had been colonized by European powers in the 19th century began to oppose imperial domination. The anti-imperial movements that developed everywhere were nationalist. That means they all struggled to form independent nation states and were inspired by a sense of collective national unity. European ideas of nationalism were not replicated anywhere as people developed their own specific way of nationalism. However, the idea that society should be organized into nation states came to be accepted as a natural and universal phenomenon.